change your mind and break free from codependency and trauma patterns that are creating so much pain and suffering in your life. Welcome back to the biology of stress, how to heal from pain, codependency, and any kind of unresolved emotional trauma, including narcissistic abuse. This is the third training where I'll be teaching you how to truly trust and love yourself again after trauma by understanding your style of attachment. My goal of this series is to show you the critical things you need to know about how you were wired in early childhood so that you can keep yourself safe, and the coping skills that you develop that may be stopping you from losing the weight, finding the love of your life, or having more money now. In the last video, you learned about the ACEs and early developmental trauma patterns that keep you stuck from having what you want, because to your nervous system it is life-threatening. You also know that when you work with your nervous system, you change those unconscious trauma patterns and you stop sabotaging yourself. Everything starts falling into place and your entire life will change for the better. I've loved reading some of your comments and already seeing some of the light bulb moments that you're having. If you don't know me by now, I'm Sarah Jane Farrell. I'm a traumatologist, which is just a very fancy way of saying that I help highly sensitive people and empaths just like you to transform your unresolved trauma patterns into trust so that you can deeply love yourself again. If you haven't watched the previous two videos, I really suggest that you stop here and go back and watch them. In video 1, you discovered that all emotions are feedback, that something is out of alignment, and that pain is trauma trapped in your body. In video 2, you found out how high your ACEs are by taking that ACE test. Thank you for those of you who let me know that the tools inside the Resilience Handbook are making a huge difference already to your life. That makes me so happy. I explained how an overwhelming event can throw a normally functioning person into emotional and physical distress months to years sometimes after the event has happened, and how you can start building that resilience back up after any kind of emotional trauma or abuse. It's been so wonderful to see your comments coming in and find out how high your ACE test was, and see that you're starting to realize that you did the best that you could with what you had at the time when you couldn't fight or flight or flee. Your survival patterns kept you safe and alive to be here today with me. And I am so happy to hear that you're finding relief and more self-compassion as you start to know who you are and how you created certain coping strategies as a child to keep you safe. It's a huge step forward toward trusting yourself again and getting out of these old pain pathways. If you haven't taken the ACE test, please pause this video and go and do that now. And then let me know in the comments below how you feel knowing that none of this is your fault, just bad programming. In video 1, you learned that when your needs are not met, your nervous system gets imprinted with those experiences and beliefs that the world is not a safe place, you're not lovable, or that you're not enough. I shared a little bit about how I got to the root cause of why I lived for years in debilitating anxiety, chronic depression, and also why I'm on a mission to share what I've learned to help you to understand how your unresolved childhood trauma and attachment wounds may be keeping you stuck, exhausted, and alone. And I don't want you to have to take 20 years like I did and spend so much money not getting the results that you want by being here with me now. My hope really is that you're realizing that through your subconscious patterns and these protective or defensive beliefs that you have had in place, or what some call limiting beliefs, your nervous system has done a fantastic job keeping you alive. Enough of that now. No more surviving. It's time for you to thrive. I really hope that you're feeling excited and optimistic that you can heal those trauma wounds and claim back your power. When you take full responsibility for yourself, you stop playing the victim in saying, life shouldn't be like this, and you stop blaming and shaming and withdrawing and judging the crap out of you, everything starts to change. Now, when you can recognize you're being triggered, you instantly take that feedback and then create your own safety. You did that little exercise in the playwork yesterday, and I'd love to know how that went for you. More importantly, you've taken those first loving and brave steps to get really honest with yourself about why you're in pain, or you're walking around feeling dead inside, that something's just off. And by understanding how your unresolved trauma patterns put you at a higher risk of heart disease, cancer, and autoimmune disease, as well as anxiety, depression, and addiction, if left untreated, you can now begin your healing journey and get sustainable results that hold. No more band-aiding. You're realizing that none of this is your fault. As I said, it's just bad programming. And you can change those unconscious patterns that put you in a state of survival, anxiety, and overwhelming stuckness. You can bring your nervous system down into more rest and digest state. You also know that we live in a world where there is constant stress, constant uncertainty, constant volatility. It's not going to go away. So we need healthy stress, and we need to learn how to work with the unhealthy stresses. It's what grows us when we don't scare ourselves sick and learn how to work with our nervous systems. My goal is to help you to cultivate more resilience in your life so that you can grow and thrive in the presence of uncertainty and things that you're not going to always see coming. And the good news is that a human nervous system can adapt and grow. We evolve from uncertainty in our environments. So you have the wiring. It's about training that wiring to be more adaptable and resilient in the face of uncertainty and stress. What does that mean? Well, it's about doing without knowing. It's also about learning through failure and moving forward without needing to know the full-on plan. You've got to get back into balance and be able to handle what's going to feel like chaos and randomness and things that you can't prepare for. See, we have no idea how to predict the future, no matter what model we're using. But we can become emotionally stronger and more flexible. When you have a strong, flexible emotional system and a nervous system, you can't but become more resilient and confident. And the stronger your trust muscle is, the more you'll be able to not just handle anything that comes your way, you'll be able to thrive no matter what. You already have the brain circuitry for it. Now it's about engaging with your nervous system and getting more emotionally fit and flexible. That's the good news. Your brain is able to change those old neural pathways. And when you learn how to calm down your nervous system by becoming safely embodied, peace of mind, more flow and ease, and above all, trust just grow organically. Manifesting tools work the same way. You see the vision, believe the vision, and repeat it. Self-worth isn't a requirement. Safety is. And it has absolutely nothing to do with deserving or worthiness. Manifesting tools only work not because you're confident in using them, but because you are safely embodied to be consistent in the training of your brain. You're relentlessly focused on changing your story. And then you trust yourself to take a risk beyond that level of safe and familiar, which your nervous system loves. It loves predictability. And we have to learn to work with it. So I want you to drop into your heart. Just tune in. Feel, sense, and just take a moment to notice what that feels like in your body. Just let that settle in. Because like so many of us, you have a sense of what you want, and you just didn't know how to put it all together up until now. Because we all have self-worth issues bumping up against our desires, it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of self-worth and loathing, if you're human, you're struggling with your value, with trust, and to love yourself unapologetically. Bruce Lipton, one of my first mentors, says that
95% of our life is coming from the programs of life, how to live life that we get in the first 7 years of life.
You come out of the womb, and within 4 years, you've only just got here. You're sitting at a desk with an authority figure representing the state's version of everything in front of you, telling you when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can speak, when you can go to the toilet, when you can eat, what is, what isn't, what's possible, what's not possible, and the nature of everything.
Every human, and this is a fact, every human first 7 years is downloaded hypnosis. The brain of a child under 7 is in a lower vibrational frequency. When you put wires on a person's head, you read electroencephalograph, reading brain activity. A child below 7 has a lower vibration than consciousness. It's called theta. Theta is imagination. Oh, that's how kids play a tea party with mud pies, but to them it's a real thing. A kid rides a broom, it's a horse. That's theta, imagination. Theta is also hypnosis. And the idea is this: before you can become conscious, if you don't have any programs, what are you going to be conscious of?
It's a download of normal, one of the greatest forms of mind control. Repetition, 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 all the way through your formative years.
What kind of programs are required to live on this planet? I say, how do you get them? Theta is hypnosis. You just watch. You watch your parents, you watch your siblings, and your community, because you have to learn how many 100,000 rules. Think about it. Teach an infant these rules. It's like, oh, you don't have to. First 7 years, they observe it and just download it.
What I'm seeing is more and more people beginning to question what they've not questioned before, because perception is everything. Perception dictates what you believe, what you don't believe, what you'll challenge, what you won't challenge, what you'll accept, you won't accept. Once they've got your perceptions, they've got you, and they've got your life. This is why they want to control the information that people receive and to marginalize alternative ways of looking at the world. Because where do perceptions come from? They come from information received.
95% of our life, this is a fact, comes from those programs in the subconscious. Every day, only about 5% of the life are you using conscious, which is creative. 5%.
So your life is being lived, even though you think you're living your life.
you've learned that the nervous system, when overstimulated, it makes you feel unsafe in your body, unsupported by the world, lost, disconnected, and unable to make wise choices, decisive choices, and without direction in your life. You just keep wandering in that hope mentality that something might change. As the nervous system unwinds, your attention expands, going to dissolve self-doubt, to enhance your interest in listening, and to guide you toward trusting that the power of choice is yours and is always in reach. I created this series because I believe we all deserve to feel safe and empowered. After working with thousands of women over the past 2 decades as a nervous system specialist, the biggest problem I see is that oftentimes we've never felt safe enough to learn how to love ourselves fully. And the key to feeling safe, more empowered, and abundant is to heal from your own unresolved childhood trauma and attachment wounds so that you can finally find your way back to yourself and get out of the cycle of self-abandonment and rejection. So let's dive into today's training. We're going to do a little Neuroscience 101 so that you can start to see how you're wired from your childhood attachment style. And when you know what your attachment wounds are, then you can begin to reparent yourself from a place of inner safety and compassion. You're going to learn the 3 main insecure attachment styles so that in the next video, you can start to learn how to trust yourself to create your own safety and grow up your child parts. So what exactly is attachment theory? Well, it's a psychological model pioneered by British child psychiatrist John Bowlby that addresses how we as humans respond in relationship when we're feeling stress or perceive a threat, when we're just feeling like we're in danger. And it's quite simply the dominant pattern of how we relate to others that plays out in our lives. Our attachment styles are informed by our early childhood experiences and those relational templates that we picked up from our parents or caretakers or other significant early influences. Attachment theory essentially says that infants will bond to a primary caretaker they are presented with, and it's this caretaker who is critical for the child's emotional and social development. Please understand, attachment theory doesn't aim to put even more pressure on parents or caretakers by implying that you have to be a perfect caretaker. It just doesn't work like that, and we do the best with what we can. That's not the goal. It's also impossible. The goal instead is to be a really good enough caretaker who can repair ruptures with the infant and child when they happen, and they inevitably will. So this is the ideal. When you're a securely attached person, you have the foundations for getting your healthy needs met. There's a steady springboard of self-esteem and self-confidence from which you can make your dreams happen. It's important to understand that we really only need secure bonding 20% of the time. So your caretaker, usually a parent or parents, was really well attuned to your needs while also allowing you to grow to be independent. That's what we're all aiming for. But when this doesn't happen, when a parent or caretaker is repeatedly failing to attune and repair after rupture, and where there's outright abuse and emotion or physical neglect, that impacts the infant's sense of secure attachment. And the bottom line is this: infants and little children are powerless. We all were when we were kids, truly. You cannot leave the relationship with the adult when you're being mistreated or not getting enough secure attachment. But you can adapt, and you can cope and manage that less than good enough relationship in various ways and behaviors. Ultimately, those are going to correspond to your primary attachment style. Attachment theory was further developed and refined by psychologist Mary Ainsworth, a student of Bowlby's work, and she really expanded this out in the mid-20th century when she identified four main attachment styles, some of which are famously illustrated in The Strange Experiment. Woo, 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 woo. The four attachment styles are secure, anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and anxious disorganized. They all have the anxiety part of it because the nervous system is out of whack. So one thing we all have in common with other species is that we are biologically wired for love, safety, connection, and belonging. Secure bonding is the foundation for getting your healthy needs met. And I want for all of us to return to our hearts and trust that we're enough, because when we do that, then we can live from empathy, care, and kindness to how we treat other species and the earth. It was only when I learned how to apply attachment theory in an embodied way that I kind of turned my entire life around. Not only by working with my nervous system, but by listening to my physical body. So I want you to get comfortable. Put away any distractions, because I want you to really listen with your whole body mind to some of the examples from my clients, and then see if you can relate with any of them. Take my client Mandy, for example, who said, "It's weird, I know, but I actually feel closer to him when he's traveling for work or away on the weekend with his friends. When he's home and acting super loving, it feels kind of clingy to me. I actually end up getting mad and then feel pretty distant from him. It's really weird, I know. Shouldn't I feel the opposite way?" Or my client Caroline, who said, "When we fight and he needs to take a break, I get so incredibly overwhelmed and anxious. I can't leave him alone. I text him or I try and follow him around the house until he agrees to talk to me and make up. It makes him so angry and makes the fight worse, but I can't help myself. Another client of mine, Doug, said, my wife and I have a really good relationship. It's not perfect, but what is? I love her and mostly feel really close to her. Sure, we fight like all couples, but we're pretty good at making up afterwards and working through it. It's taken time, of course, but we've got a good marriage. So can you relate to any of those examples that I just gave to you? All three examples describe a different kind of attachment style. The patterns based on the beliefs that you formed as children that you carry into adulthood. You live what you learn as a child, and then you wonder why you can't trust people or trust yourself with money or ask for help later on in who or what you're choosing. And while many of us will see ourselves heavily in one attachment style, it's also possible to see yourself in two or more of these styles, depending on who you're with at any given time. We adapt to our environment. And as you know from taking the ACE test, when you felt unsafe or threatened, you learned to cope by adopting an attachment style. And for those of you who may have come from a dysfunctional, neglectful, or relationally unsupportive home, the chances are high that you might not have learned secure attachment. So you developed coping skills through an attachment style to protect yourself. And you did a really good job with it. The challenging aspect of this is that when we have an insecure attachment style, it can create challenges in your emotional life and in your relationships, all of them, including the one with money. Most people don't even realize that the reason why they can't have intimacy with their partner or financial wealth or lead a successful team is because their nervous system, to the nervous system, it feels incredibly dangerous and life-threatening. It's unpredictable and you don't have any control over it. So you don't just wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to destroy my marriage today or lose all of my savings. No, these things happen because depending on your attachment style, you are terrified that person that you love is going to leave you or that you can't be trusted to make your money work for you. The good news is this. In the next video, you're going to see that secure attachment can be learned no matter what attachment style you have or how much trauma you have had in your life. You see, your nervous system was shaped by your environment and the relationships with your primary caregivers pre-7-year-old. So if your parents set boundaries for you, were consistent in how they created healthy attachment, you're going to seek out those kind of right relationships and partners in your life. But if they were not able to express emotions, or on the flip side, your parents didn't know how to express their needs, or there was too much heated emotion, and nobody quite knew how to self-regulate, you'll become used to that. And in a very strange way, you seek out what you learned when you were young. Oftentimes, my clients want to know why, even though they know better, they keep choosing narcissistic, abusive, or emotionally unavailable partners. When we get to unpack the childhood, the root cause is more likely than not showing up as an alcoholic or addicted parent who constantly criticized, blamed, or shamed them, which led them to believe that they were unlovable or a version of not being good enough. And if you're listening to this and you know that nobody was ever there for you, and you have found that you keep creating situations that perpetuate this cycle of abuse and keep you in pain, whether that's in your body or emotionally, you're not alone. You can change this. And if you didn't have good bonding or safety, the key is we've got to first realize that we're all traumatized in relationship and that we all get into relationships so that we can heal. In order to do that, both parties involved have to be interested and willing to do the work to move forward. So if you do not have a safe environment to support you now, If you're doing all the lifestyle changes, getting support, but then you're going back into a home or a work situation that's toxic, it becomes impossible for you to heal. Believe me, I stayed in a marriage like that for 14 years, and you cannot change it until you change your environment. So as I go through the 3 insecure attachment wounds, I'm going to share how they actually show up to stop you from trusting that you can create a life you love and feel confident again. And in the next video, I'm going to give you some pragmatic ways that you can start to bring your nervous system back online in a healthy, balanced way and get to that one we're all aiming for, secure attachment. Now, many of us got good enough parenting, so this is not meant in any way to go back and get angry at and blame your parents. Earlier generations used things like criticism and judgment and even shame as a motivational and educational tool because that's what they were taught. Up until now, recently, parents believed it was the right thing to do, to leave a baby to cry itself to sleep in a room on their own. And now neuroscience is proving how much damage that actually does to the developing brain and the nervous system, where the signal is one of shutdown and learned helplessness. That nobody's coming to save me or calm me down. I go into depth about Bessel van der Kolk's work with polyvagal theory and how as children we borrow the vagal tone of our parents until ours has fully developed in our own nervous system. And that's all there to help you to reset that and repair these old programs. For now, just know that these wounds tend to be passed down as unresolved trauma from generation after generation, and the generations before us really didn't know any better. We do know better now. And while these wounds may have come from our upbringing, there's also society and culture where many of us picked up our attachment wounds from. These 3 insecure attachment wounds keep you recreating the same thing in your life over and over again, kind of like Groundhog Day, where unless we step up and change things, we continue the cycle of intergenerational and familial trauma patterns of abuse. The first type of insecure attachment is like Mandy, the anxious, avoidant, dismissive, who feels better when her partner is away. People with this kind of attachment may characterize as wanting and requiring a high degree of independence and self-sufficiency. Fundamentally, they don't believe it's safe to be emotionally close, and so they guard themselves against intimacy by not seeking out relationships or pushing intimacy away and distancing themselves from the attachment figure. They need to feel in control in order to stay safe. In general, people with an anxious avoidant attachment style, they feel discomfort being dependent on and depending on others. They have a very strong need to self-protect and keep their distance away from relationships. Likewise, they may not have high regard for themselves or relationships in general. With this style of attachment wound, a caregiver was excessively critical, dismissive, emotionally distant, and or insensitive to the child's needs. This child grows into an adult with the feelings of, I'm not safe, I'm not loved, and they come to the conclusion that it's actually better if they don't need anyone. The hurt and rejection is why they believe they must armor up against the world and be fiercely independent. The way this person operates in the world is that they fear risking or being out of control. They fear truly desiring and belonging. And there are problems handling emotions with themselves and the emotions within relationship. A person with this wound will harshly judge and label their partner forever having or expressing their needs. And they're often trying to disconnect from relationships because disconnection is what they know is safe to them. So rather than being engaged in relationship where they cannot trust, this wound would rather numb out by binge eating and purging or zoning out on television, drinking too much, or some other form of coping. This attachment wound would rather self-abandon than feel the pain of being abandoned. It tends to manifest as obsessive addictive because they're numbing themselves from the need to be in relationship with themselves and with others, because again, being alone and self-sufficient is what they know and what they're comfortable with. They get to control how much they can tolerate. The anxious, avoidant, insecure, wounded person can sometimes feel like a misfit or an outcast. They deeply want a loving relationship because they're human, but then they sabotage it because it feels terrifying and unsafe to be available or vulnerable in a relationship. The second type of attachment wound is anxious ambivalent, like Caroline, who said, when we fight and he needs to take a break, I get so incredibly overwhelmed and anxious. I can't leave him alone. I text him or try and follow him around the house until he agrees to talk to me and make up. It makes him so angry and makes the fight even worse, but I just can't help myself. The anxious ambivalent is characterized by a need for high degrees of responsiveness, attunement, and reassurance from their attachment figure. People with this style of attachment may feel a great deal of anxiety when they're separated from their attachment figure or when the bond between them is ruptured or perceived to be ruptured. They often attract in their codependents someone with a narcissistic personality trait. The anxiety can usually only be remedied with renewed contact with the attachment figure. Because of this, individuals with an anxious, ambivalent attachment style can become overly dependent and needy on the person that they're attached to, like a lover or a mother. In contrast to securely attached individuals, these with an anxious, ambivalent attachment style, they have a very low self-esteem and they don't trust their capacity to be in relationship. This ends up leaving a person without a feeling of consistency and reliability. In relationships, the caretaker or the parent has given inconsistent bonding. There is a sense of on again, off again parenting, and the child cannot rely on consistency. So that poor little child grows up feeling, will I ever feel safe in relationship? Will I ever truly feel loved? And the basic question for this child is, will my needs ever be consistently met as an adult? The way the anxious ambivalent wound shows up is the feeling of being incapable of truly being loved or being lovable enough. And this shows up as huge people-pleasing types of behaviors. There are little to no boundaries because people pleasers really have good boundaries. They feel I'm deserving and unlovable and inadequate. It's really confusing. So when you're in a relationship as an ambivalent, insecure, attached person, your partner's never able to do enough to prove their love. It is absolutely never enough. So here are some of the ways it shows up, and maybe you can relate. I'd love you to post those in the comments below. Here's the first one. As an adult, there's an addictive, codependent, needy quality. They have a fear of abandonment, so even if their partner is just going to work or on a short business trip, it feels like death to them. And a great simple example of this is from that movie, The Runaway Bride, with Julia Roberts. And she had a whole bunch of different fiancés, and whoever she was with at the time, her favorite kind of eggs changes to be whatever his kind of favorite eggs are. And she doesn't have a voice or a say in anything. She's always waiting for feedback. So if you're a person who has this kind of attachment wound, you can also become very codependent. And often this creates the very thing that you fear, which is that your partner feels suffocated by your neediness and doesn't want to be there anymore. So they leave. And then the anxious ambivalent solidifies their protective defenses of You see, everybody leaves me. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. The third type of attachment wound is anxious, disorganized, insecure attachment. And this is Megan and my own style from childhood. The fear is that no matter what I do, nothing will ever change. It feels like there's no way out, no solution. And as you may have already guessed, individuals with an anxious, disorganized attachment style, they have a combination of the other attachment styles. It's a blend of whatever suits the environment. So, for instance, like myself and Megan, you long for closeness. That's the anxious, ambivalent part. But also paradoxically, you fear closeness, anxious, avoidant. And this can lead to chaotic and inconsistent responses when presented with intimacy, and certainly wanting to get vulnerable with someone. So as with the anxious ambivalent and the anxious avoidant types, people have this disorganized attachment style. They tend to have a lower degree of regard for themselves and for their relationships. A disorganized, wounded, insecure person had an upbringing with a caregiver who was very unpredictable. It's that come here, go away confusion. And I certainly learned that from having an alcoholic father who had anger issues. And you may have seen this if you've been in a relationship with a narcissistic person or a manic depressive parent, when the child just never knew when the parent or caregiver was going to act up. So it's a constant holding your breath, walking on eggshells, or what is known as chronic, toxic, unpredictable daily stresses. Life is very unpredictable. The signals are mixed up, what somebody says and their body language, which we read intuitively as children, they just don't match up. And they never really know what to expect. They don't know what's going to happen next. And what's really crazy making to this child is that they have no option but to seek comfort from the very same person who's also the source of their unpredictability and their pain, whether that's physical or emotional or both. So the little child believes people hurt. Relationship is painful. No one is safe. I'm not loved, but I want and long for love. It's that wiring where we need safety, connection, and belonging. So this causes a really huge dilemma in this child. And some of the ways this shows up as an adult is that they have a lot of difficulty self-soothing and difficulty opening up to others and trusting in others. It plays a huge part. So you can see why that is, because they never actually knew what to expect from their caregivers in any given moment. Remember, they've got these two conflicting behaviors of a parent giving love one moment and then lashing out the next, making the child feel very unsafe. So there's this constant living in fear and a chronic need to fight or flee, and they can't. They can't run away from their parent. So there's a sense of inner confusion and a learned helplessness, especially under stress that results in memory difficulties and labels like ADHD or OCD or even bipolar. They're all symptoms of untreated PTSD survival patterns. This really happens because the child's learned to dissociate from themselves and detach from the scary events that are coming from the very same person who was supposed to give them comfort and keep them safe. They take what they know within them into adulthood. So there you have it, the three main insecure attachment styles. In my Out of the Blues 90-day nervous system reboot program, we go much deeper into how to heal your attachment wounds. But I hope that you heard enough today to identify which attachment style has been your way of coping and keeping you safe. If you're still unsure what is your primary style and you're interested in learning more, then take the quiz below and then please let me know in the comment section below, which style are you and what are you most excited about learning now that you know that you can change this? The big question you may have, if you can't necessarily identify with being securely attached, is, so how do I become more securely attached? How do I create safety in my own body? So stay with me for the next video where I'm going to teach you about the secure attachment style we all want more of, and how you can actually achieve that inner peace and safe, loving embodiment that you have been looking for your whole life and didn't know how to get. I'm going to dive really deep into the question in my next video. So please keep an eye on your inbox to learn more. And until next time, take very good care of you, knowing these wounds can be healed. You've already taken your next brave step in identifying which of the 3 attachment wounds you carry. And I want you to get excited. You've got this. Because not only is it possible to heal and truly live a beautiful life you love, you can also do it in a self-soothing, safe, and nurturing way that is your individual prescription for health. And I'm going to help you to do that. I've healed myself and thousands of my clients with the exact same methodology that you're going to learn in the Out of the Blues program. So for now, please hit that Facebook like button, but most importantly, leave me a comment and let me know what's your biggest takeaway from today. How are you feeling now that you know that you did a great job keeping yourself safe and you no longer need those old coping patterns to get you the results, the love, the financial abundance, and the freedom to be you? I'm loving the comments and the feedback so far, and I'd really appreciate it if you would share this life-changing information with people that you love. By engaging in the conversation and sharing your insights, you inspire others to know that they can heal from trauma and live a fulfilled, deeply happy life too. That's called healthy co-regulation, and I'll meet you on the inside of video 4.